Bon dia and welcome to Biking Barcelona. First of all, we are really bamboozled to have over 150 subscribers. So thank you so much for that. If you have not subscribed yet to our channel, we would appreciate the support. So Barcelona has many quaint and narrow streets, but it also has this. Avinguda Diagonal is a wide road that cuts through the city from one end to the other. At times, it even looks like this is the US. Yet, despite it being home to car commuters and office parks and corporate headquarters, it also has shops and plenty of space for pedestrians, and yes, bicycles. So, how does Diagonal manage to have it all? Let's find out together.
We're starting from Plaza Cinco de Ojos, which is in the middle of Diagonal. We're actually only going to look at half of Diagonal today. The other half will need its own video because of the planned tram line extension and other future projects. So we'll get to that another time. Also, we usually film these videos on the weekend. We both have capitalist day jobs, so that's when we have time for this YouTube thing. But
to give the full effect of Diagonal, we went back and filmed during a weekday rush hour, which also happens to be my daily commute to work. We're going to be switching back and forth between the two films, so you can see the complete picture. Diagonal doesn't only remind us a little bit of the US because it's wide and full of cars. It's also that it's full of fast food chains like Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's, Starbucks, big box stores like MediaMarkt and Decathlon, and even a huge department store and an absolutely giant mall. It also has the traditional dead zones of office parks and corporate campuses.
And yet, at the same time, here we are biking a lovely tree-lined boulevard with lively pedestrian traffic and nice benches and terraces. Though it's definitely not perfect. As we mentioned in our +1 -2 video, the bike lane here is far too narrow. Not only is there not enough room to pass, there's barely enough room for everyone riding to work.
Let's take a closer look at how the space on this street is allocated and organized.
On this first section, we have a wide sidewalk, a one-lane service street, this bike lane, a generous divider with trees that also serves as space for bus stops, then the bus and taxi lane, and finally 2 car lanes, with the same thing again, just mirrored, going the other direction. The key here is how the traffic is divided between the central through lanes and the service lanes on the side.
Well, actually, no one here calls them service lanes. Locals distinguish between the central and the laterals, and we take their separate functions into account when planning the route to drive somewhere or when giving directions.
It's not just the existence of these laterals, but also what doesn't exist here. Left turns. There are no left turns at all, and right turns are only allowed from the service streets, not from the central lanes. Moreover, there are only limited opportunities to enter the service lanes. On this particular stretch, it's only possible using the roundabouts at the larger intersections. And at the same time, the service lanes may not be used continuously. There are periodic forced right turns for everyone except taxis and, of course, cyclists. Though we did see plenty of private cars ignoring this rule and driving straight through, unfortunately. So what we have going on here is that the central section acts as a road, a thoroughfare that connects 2 points and is just for traveling, while the sides act as streets, places with stuff you actually want to go to, like houses and shops. There is enough separation to allow each to fulfill its function.
Later, Diagonal changes. It gets wider, it adds reversible lanes, and a tram. But the same basic idea of 2 separated functions remains. We'll see that in a moment when we get further up.
Wait, up? But I thought we were biking towards the southwest right now.
Yes, up. If you look at the map of Barcelona on, your computer or your phone, it will of course be oriented like this, with the north at the top. But that's not how we locals think of our city. We prefer to orient our maps like this, with the coastline kind of horizontal at the bottom, and the mountain horizontal at the top. It fits better, and the grid makes more sense this way. And instead of north, south, east, and west, we give directions using mountain, sea, and Llobregat and Besòs, the 2 rivers that enclose Barcelona. Now, if you look at Diagonal, you can clearly see that even though the section we are biking today goes towards the southwest, it also runs up towards the mountains. Hence, we are biking the upper half. Okay, get ready. It's coming.
What is?
It's my least favorite part of my commute. Which brings us to our new semi-regular segment, Bicinyap's. Nyap is the Catalan word for sloppy work, or for something poorly repaired. Bicinyaps is a word that some of the local bicycle community uses for the kind of thing we are about to see. We want to thank Twitter user Virginia for introducing this jargon to me.
This is Plaza Macia. We saw a quick glimpse of it in our very first video, but this time, instead of turning left, we're going to continue forward on Diagonal.
On the other side of Macia, the bike lane becomes bidirectional and continues onto the sidewalk as part of a mixed-use path. To get there, though, we first have to make this tight, awkward left turn across the lateral street. But without straying into the crosswalk full of pedestrians, even though they are probably straying into the bike lane because it's so poorly signaled for everyone. And they're forcing you to stop and start in the middle of your turn. And also without getting in the way of the oncoming cyclists trying to make the same tight turn in the opposite direction into this too narrow bike lane. And then, on the other side of this crossing, you still have to make a sharp right turn, crossing the path of the pedestrians you had just worked hard to avoid. All in order to continue your journey in peace. I would like to emphasize that even when not too crowded, it's inconvenient to have to make a sharp turn starting from being stopped at a red light, and also that there isn't enough room for all the cyclists to wait for the light to turn green. But it is so much worse during rush hour, when it's also full of pedestrians crossing, because precisely when you are starting to move is when you have the least balance, and starting with a sharp turn at very low speed, trying not to run into pedestrians and hurt them is incredibly stressful for everyone. Even more so while keeping an eye out for cars potentially deciding to run the red light and kill you.
Okay, we have finally made it through, and things have changed a little, both in form and feel. You immediately have the sense that everything is wider here. The lateral service streets have gained lanes, including a bus and taxi lane on one side. The 3 central lanes of this 6-lane expanse are reversible, leading into the city in the morning and out of the city in the afternoon. The focus here has really shifted in favor of cars and commuting.
But not everything has been handed over to the cars. On this side of the street, we no longer have shops and terraces like before. But we do have this nice 3-line mixed-use path with bidirectional cycle lanes. There is still enough sense of separation from the busy road that people use this for a run or a stroll or to walk or bike to their offices. There are also bus stops, bicycle parking, and bicycle sharing stations, and even some outdoor exercise equipment, reflecting that this area is more for recreation than urban shopping. But sadly, there are no playgrounds for children.
On the other side, we still have some shops, but they've gotten bigger, culminating in the Corte Inglés department store and the massive Lea Mall that takes up multiple blocks. There are also large office buildings and corporate campuses. And at one point, we even pass over this, though the interchange manages to blend reasonably well into the urban landscape. All of this starts to stretch the space here beyond the friendly, urban, human scale of the more central parts of the city. But what we also have is the tram, and with it, everyone's favorite, grassy tram tracks. Grassy tram tracks. The tram helps shrink the larger distances on this part of Diagonal to a more manageable, slightly more human scale. It also extends past Barcelona's boundary into neighboring municipalities, offering an alternative to driving into the city, in addition to the existing commuter rail and bus systems.
This upper end of Diagonal is also home to 2 universities, UB and UPC, which is where I went for undergrad and masters. Did you know that they actually opened the tram during my first year of undergrad?
How was that?
Oh, it was the best. If we had a long pause between classes, we would just hop on the tram, go to the mall, and listen to new CDs that had just come out. Or, if we felt very fancy, we would grab takeaway sushi from the big food court in the mall and go back to campus and share it between friends. Note that here, most students who are from the local area don't live on campus, but commute daily. So, universities are not like small villages, like they are in the US. They only have classrooms and labs and such. Most of us use the metro to get to class, but metro stations are much more spaced out. Without the tram, the universities felt a little bit isolated. But with the tram, we felt like we had been given a shortcut to all the fun stuff that was nearby, and it just gave us many more options.
We're almost at the end of our ride, but this wouldn't be Biking Barcelona if we didn't also give you a little bit of Barcelona history. And the history of Avinguda Diagonal, or more specifically of its name, reflects that history perfectly.
The Diagonal was conceived by Ildefons Cerdà as part of his 1859 plan for the expansion of Barcelona. If you want a quick refresher on what that was all about, you can watch the first minute of our tactical urbanism video. Cerdà intended for this street to be called Gran Via Diagonal, because he was a sensible, no-nonsense kind of guy. Diagonal, obviously, means diagonal, so it was a pretty literal name.
In 1874, it was instead officially named Avinguda Diagonal, after an important liberalizing politician who had helped write the Spanish Constitution of 1812 and the Constitution of 1837, neither of which were actually in effect anymore.
Then in 1922, it was renamed to Avinguda de la Nacionalitat Catalana, in honor of the Mancomunitat de Catalunya, or the Commonwealth of Catalonia, which was a regional government that represented an important revival of Catalan autonomy.
Until it was outlawed and disbanded in 1925 by Spain's less famous first fascist dictator, who had just come to power, and who then also renamed the street to Avenida de Alfonso XIII, in honor of the king.
But his dictatorship didn't last. On the 14th of April 1931, the Second Spanish Republic was declared, and with it the street gained a new name, Avinguda del 14 d'Abril, or, in English, the 14th of April.
Unfortunately, the Second Republic didn't last either, and in 1939, the fascists marched into Barcelona, and they eventually renamed the street after the fascist dictator who had gained power.
Finally, following his death in 1975 and the transition to democracy, Diagonal was finally, in 1979, officially named what everyone had probably been calling it anyway the whole time, Avinguda Diagonal.
And with that, we've reached the present, and also pretty much the end of our ride today. As we near the outskirts of the city proper, the bike lane changes one more time into this slightly meandering mixed-use path, though there are plans to extend a proper bike path through this section soon. Eventually, Diagonal itself ends and turns into a giant freeway heading in and out of the city. But even though that means the end of this video, it doesn't mean the end of the bike path, which continues as part of the local Bicinyap 7 bike route, and what will soon be the new Trans-European Eurovelo 8 route, both of which we'll have to talk about some other time. That's all for today. Thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for part 2, where we will cover the lower half of Diagonal. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you in the comments, and of course appreciate every like and subscribe. Gracias. Fins aviat.
Oh, already? Sorry, there's a dog and I got distracted.